Welcome to the Femininja Project. I am your host, Cheryl Ilove, middle-aged ninja hiding in plain sight, dedicated to restoring human dignity one person at a time and helping you unleash your personal power. Discover that it's possible to look like a woman, act like a lady, move like a ninja, and think like a warrior. And remember, men are always welcome on the Femininja Project. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Femininja Project. I have a fantastic guest for you today. His name is Scott Forrester. He is a movement expert, a mind-body specialist, a licensed physical therapy assistant, a certified personal trainer, and a Feldenkrais practitioner. He is also the author of The Aware Athlete: How the Wild Origins of Our Human Nature and the New Science of Neuroplasticity Are Redefining Fitness. It's a pleasure to have you on the show, and thank you for being here.
Thank you, Cheryl.
So you have quite a story. I mean, you have quite a background. I love your background because, it really is kind of aligned with mine as well. We have a lot in common. But what I really want you to talk about is, how did you get to this point in your life where you have become this movement expert and the mind-body connection? Because I think a lot of times people just toss that phrase around mind-body, but really not fully understanding it. So how did that come to be to where you are right now?
Well, I've had several careers. I started out in construction when I first got married almost 50 years ago.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And so we did residential framing, and I've done some siding, did 6 years of roofing, a lot of outdoor physical activity in all kinds of weather, and enjoyed certain aspects of that, lifting the heavy weights and being outside. And then I also carried mail for 22 years, and so I was outside doing that every day. And also, I've had some minor careers there, but at one point I fell off a roof. That was actually about 20 years ago. I did that. Mm-hmm. I fell off a roof. It was kind of in a low point in mine and my wife's life at the time. She didn't like where we had just moved, and she was sick, and we weren't making enough money, and things weren't going too well there. And so I fell off the roof, and I had to let her know that I wasn't doing too well. Anyway, so it was a kind of a low point. And so falling off the roof does a number of things. It influences your self-image, because you've had all this strength all these years, and now you can hardly walk. So I limped over to the truck and went home. Anyway, but also it makes it difficult to make a living. That's another. Anyway, but the third thing it did, after I began to get a little bit better, is it took away my ability to run, which I love to do. Never was a great runner, but I love being outdoors, and I love moving like that, and I really enjoyed running. Since the time I was in high school. I have, which is a story in itself. But anyway, so I can't do that anymore. And I can't afford to have it fixed.
Oh. So
I went almost a year and actually that happened during a time when I wasn't working at the post office. I worked there 14 years, decided to try something else, came back for another 8. So I came back to the post office, finally had health insurance, went to 2 doctors. One said, you don't need to fix that.
Now, how long, I'm sorry to interrupt, but how long had you been walking around with a broken ankle that wasn't fixed?
About a year. Now, the tibia is the main weight-bearing bone in the lower leg, and the fibula not so much. So what was broken was not the joint between the talus and the tibia, or the talus and the calcaneus. it was the medial malleolus of the tibia that was broken. And what that did, now that's the harder side of the ankle to sprain, but after you fall off a roof, you can generate enough force to do that. And so actually I had just strapped on an air cast and went back to work, just tighten it up. So yeah. Anyway, so I finally had enough money to have it repaired because I had good health insurance again. So I went to the first doctor, said, "Oh, you don't need to fix that." Went to the second doctor and took x-rays and MRIs. And she said, "Well, that's still viable because what had happened is the bone snapped off. And so now you don't have access to those ligaments. The center of the ankle joint is okay, but you don't have any ligament support on that side. And there's 3 major ligaments that attach to that aspect of the tibia, that big lump that you call the ankle bone on the inside." And so she said, "Well, that's all still viable. The bone and the blood supply has continued."
Wow.
And so she went in there and did a very, very good job of fixing that. A couple screws and bone graft. And so that actually got repaired. And then I found that since I had been so active on that broken ankle without the stability, I had developed a movement pattern with my knee. I didn't know that's what it was at the time, but I had developed an inability to use my knee, so I still couldn't run.
Oh.
Not very much. Went to an orthopedic surgeon and he told me that I shouldn't run anymore. "Well, you can't run anymore, so don't do it." I go, "What?" And so then I began to look for answers. And a lot of times, so actually the first physical therapist I went to made it worse. Because a lot of times when you go to physical therapy, the answer is in the general little saying about physical therapy that sums it up. It doesn't sum up all physical therapists, but it's strength and stretch. Yeah, that's what you do. So, well, I could already deadlift 400 pounds, and I, had done mobility and stretching, things like that. So obviously that wasn't the answer. You don't have to be able to deadlift that much to run.
Yeah.
And my ankle was okay. And so I had the MRI. The MRI indicated a little bit of degenerative process going on. And that was actually the narrowing of the joint spaces on the medial side of the knee, which you would expect might happen in that case. And so I'm desperate for answers, and I'm looking around, and there had been a guy who, in search of business, he was a running coach and a PT, had given talks at several of the running shoe stores that I would attend. And he actually had given a talk at a gym in the town I was living in also. And that's where I met him, I think, he and a colleague of his. And so I had kind of forgotten about what he said. And then I'm desperate. I'm looking to find him and find things about, and I was actually searching for the Feldenkrais Method on the internet. But what I found there it didn't benefit me too much because I see a video or two here, but I don't understand it. And so there is the necessity for Feldenkrais practitioners to be around, because you need a little bit of a go-between to kind of explain what this method is all about. Because it's not about the movements. A lot of times you'll see rolling around and different movements on the floor if you search for that on the internet, the Feldenkrais Method. But it's not really about the movements. So how are you supposed to figure that out? And I got some of Moshe's writing, loved it, but it didn't make practical sense to me. In fact, his classical book, Awareness Through Movement, loved how he wrote, these long sentences, and I just loved that. But you can't, if you read somebody's writing for the very first time and you don't know the greater context of that person's life or what he's trying to talk about, you end up with a lot of questions. He says this, but that could mean these three things. And after you read a lot of his books, and then you go to some trainings, and you get I've even read his biography, and you get a sense of what he's actually talking about, and then it's great because what happened is I love the way he wrote, and he introduces these ideas, but they could go in several directions, and I can't quite grasp what he's saying. So I love the way he wrote, and the lessons in the book seem ridiculous.
That's pretty funny.
I mean, I just couldn't make that connection. To what, why is he asking you to sit on the floor and put your right hand under your right heel and put your thumb between your great toe and your next toe and lift up your leg? Why is he asking you to do that? Well, I know now, but anyway. So the second PT I went to was moderately, eventually I found him. You search your memory. What was that? And who was that? Oh, I remember his name, and you finally find him. And he was not only a PT, because generally PT is strength and stretch, but a physical therapist is an individual. And, but he was also an ultra runner. And he had won his age group in the Leadville 100 quite a few times, and he was about my age, so he was in his 50s then. So he knew what he was talking about.
Can I interrupt you just for a minute? Because
please do.
But when you say the Leadville 100, I live here in Colorado. I know Leadville. I know where it is, and I know the elevation that it is. So for the listeners who might not be familiar with Leadville, tell us a little bit about Leadville and about what the Leadville 100 is. And that's when everybody who hears this is going to say, oh my goodness, this man is a superhero.
Okay, I've never participated in that race. My physical therapist did. I have been to Leadville just to photograph it before. But that the longest I have ever gone is a couple of 50Ks. That's the farthest I have ever gone. And I've done that in a day more than once in my life. So a number of times. But anyway, so that's the farthest I've ever gone. But he was an age group winner more than once he had all these belt buckles he showed me in that particular race. Leadville is at approximately 10,000 feet. I had a friend who did that. He wanted to complete that race, and he went to Leadville and actually lived there for 6 weeks to get used to the elevation. But anyway, so it's at about 10,000 feet, and you have to go out of Leadville about 50 miles, I think. And then you climb Hope Pass. So you got up to 12,000 feet and back down to an aid station. And then as soon as you get done with your aid station, whether that's 5 minutes or 30 minutes, whatever it is, you have to turn right around and go back up over Hope Pass.
Oh, God.
And then back into town. So that's one of those races where they have you raise your right hand and say, okay, repeat after me. If I get lost, and you say lost, hurt, go ahead, say hurt.
Hurt.
Or die.
Or die.
It's my own damn fault.
It's my own damn fault for participating in such an event.
That's
I
right.
added that little last part.
Yeah. So that's what you swear to before you start.
Jeez. Yeah. Oh, sounds like a lot of fun.
It is, yeah.
No, that's sarcasm.
Yeah, no, it is sarcasm, but anyway. So that's what he had done. And yeah, 100 miles would be interesting. It's not in my vocabulary at this day right now.
I don't even like to drive 100 miles.
Actually, I do love to cover 100 miles, but not in one day.
Wow.
I was able to hike 320 miles on the PCT this summer. And then the smoke got too bad. That was a wonderful experience. I could hardly wait to get back on the trail again.
Wow.
So, yeah, so but that's nothing like running that in one day. So,
It's definitely, I mean, I've known a lot of runners and they've explained, the acceleration, the runner's high, blah, blah, blah. It's something I have never experienced, and I'm sure at this point in my life I never will, but I understand it. I mean, I
yeah, I think
understand the concept of it at some level.
so. If I think you do because you love movement, you love beautiful movement, you love. I'm going to say what you do is a little adventurous too.
Yeah, I guess it is. But
Yeah,
I'm glad you mentioned that movement, because people think of running and typically they think of just pounding the pavement. And there really truly is an art form to running. And that's basically what you found after breaking your ankle and then going back and finally, relocating this physical therapist who specialized in running.
yeah.
So when you finally found him again after that, what transpired then?
Well, he knew a lot more about than I did about what I was doing, and he had a peripheral knowledge of Feldenkrais and the Alexander technique and things like that. And he actually took me through a couple of brief lessons, not a full Feldenkrais lesson, but 20 minutes worth or so. And it had quite an effect on me. But he would say, and this is something interesting for people to know, he would say a couple of things. He would say, one, knees are easy. And another thing he would say, learn what I'm teaching you here, and you will get better every time you run instead of worse. So I learned enough from him that I could go several years without any more problems. And then I had to actually learn a little bit more because what I had learned still hadn't made me a great runner. And there was some more things to improve. Always are, I think. But that's, this is a very interesting concept because you can lift all the weight you want, you can do all the stretching you want. It might be valuable for performance, but only if you know exactly what you're doing. Why you're doing it, why is this applicable? And to get back to what you were saying, you appreciate beautiful movement. And so you might appreciate beautiful movement in animals.
Oh, yes,
Yeah.
very much so.
So could you picture yourself as, what would be an animal that would picture the kind of movement that you enjoy the most?
I would have to say either a panther or a tiger, maybe a lioness, but more the tiger just really resonates with me for some reason. A snow leopard, and I even have tiger on my website, for the podcast. But there's something about it. It just symbolizes to me grace, strength, confidence, serenity, awareness, it just something about it, and visceral movement.
Yeah, exactly. A panther will slink around. They're a smaller animal than what we think of as a tiger, maybe being. They climb trees like crazy. They move gracefully and quickly. And that would be how I would picture ninja type movements.
Yes, very much so.
Yeah. So in my book, I start at the beginning. So I start at the beginning of the world.
Wow. By the way, I do love the cover of your book.
Thank you.
So for my listeners, when they do, look it up and check it out, they'll see what I mean about the picture. When you said, now it makes sense, when you said you start at the very beginning of the world, that really makes sense to see that photo and the cover of the book. It's just beautiful.
Yeah. What does the photo mean to you?
To me, it meant something very organic.
Yeah.
And to me, it was like, again, just what you said. I got that sense of going back to the very beginning, going back to the roots of all movement. And that's when, even as I was looking at that picture, that cover, and then again, looking at the subtitle of your book, it was like, oh my gosh, that is just absolutely, beautiful the way it was put together.
Thank you. Your rack behind you has a rack full of swords there. And a sword is a tool.
Yes, it is.
So, and the spear was a very essential tool in our development to move from simply a primate that had to live in trees, maybe lived in trees, our ancestors, to one who could gain the respect of a lion. If you've seen some videos of canyon warriors,
I have not seen
jogging gracefully towards a lion who is on its kill, and several lions around it, jogging gracefully towards them on the plains, holding their spears, and the lions leave their kill.
Really?
And they have this arrangement where they'll go up with a knife then and cut off a hunk of meat, and they'll leave. And they've respected each other. But you can kill a lion, especially with more than one person, with a spear.
Oh, I'm sure, yeah. As when you know what you're doing.
Yeah, when you know what you're doing.
And that goes back to one of my favorite quotes from Moshe Feldenkrais. When you know what you're doing, you can do what you want.
Yeah, that's the essence of it. And that's exactly why human beings always work together. One human being wouldn't survive very long anywhere. But that's why they can survive on the plains and thrive and gain the respect of a lion. The lion can look and know, maybe I better back off.
That, to me, that is so fascinating, because that also kind of goes hand in glove with the martial art that I study. And it's just having that that aura, that sense of confidence, that, the spirit of the warrior that people can sense, not that you're being threatening, but they can just feel that energy coming off of you. So when you explained that they were gracefully jogging toward, the lions and the kill, and I got goosebumps, because I could just kind of envision that.
Almost like a dance. That the video I'm thinking of was, they were so elegant moving over the ground. So that takes us back to what animal what other animals might be very significant in the development of human beings. And I think of the antelope. Now, the antelope is not like human beings in one way. It's the fastest land animal over a distance. It can reach speeds almost as high as a cheetah, but it can maintain those. And it can run 60 miles an hour, or it can run 20 to 30 miles an hour for 13 to 20 miles.
Wow.
And that's graceful over them. But human beings are like dogs and horses. So if you picture yourself as an antelope, you can understand the 100-mile thing. Right. You're free to flow over the plains and go wherever you want. And you got me off on animals here. But one of the most famous 100-mile races in the country is the Western States Endurance Race. And that was started because, as another friend of mine told me, horses can trot 100 miles. And it was a horse race. But one day, somebody who was in the race, their horse went lame before the race. So he decided to enter the race anyway, or finish it, or whatever he did. He was a pretty good runner. And that's how that started. And actually, over certain terrain, humans can beat horses. So the antelope. I have a section in my book about a main human characteristic: persistence. And you've heard about persistence hunting.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah, so that's not just the ability to run down an animal, though. That is a real mind-body effort, which really shows the essence of being human. Because there's 3 types of intelligence that you need to hunt down, to use persistence hunting to hunt down an antelope of various kinds. And one is, of course, the ability to run a long distance. Doesn't have to be fast on a hot day. And if you do that with others around you, you can carry water even.
Mm-hmm.
An antelope can't carry water. And two is the ability to distinguish between various tracks, because this originally, I go over this in my book, and stop me if I'm going into too much detail on this, but originally it was difficult to prove the theory of persistence hunting, because when you would try it, it didn't matter how good a runner you were, you can't run down an antelope, because what they'll do, they'll run away from you and then they'll run back to the herd and you don't know which one you were chasing.
Oh.
So you can never win.
Mm-hmm.
They all look the same. And so number two, it takes the ability to track and to recognize different tracks, to recognize fresh tracks, so you can pick this antelope out from the herd and start working it. And number three, even beyond that, you have to have what is actually the basis of science. You have to be able to enter into the animal's mind and postulate, form a hypothesis of what would I do if I were this animal right now, and I've been out here this long in this sun that's affecting me too.
Right.
And I get to this bush and there's a lot of tracks here, or no tracks. Maybe it's over rock. Which way would I go? And it's almost an intuitive thing, but it's also a very scientific thing. The same thing that scientists do today. They form a hypothesis, they test it, and they go off in that direction. And humans were able to develop their tracking abilities so well throughout these three types of intelligence. One was just a physical ability. One was a mental knowledge bank,
Mm-hmm.
and the other one was this ability to actually enter into the experience they were in
Mm-hmm.
the way the animal would. And it works.
So one of the things that I'm thinking as you're explaining all of this is adaptability.
Adaptability is a big theme in the book. In fact, the basic definition of fitness, if you go to the general definition, is something or someone who is fit for something. So that means a tool that's fit for the job is the right tool for the job. It's,
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to use a screwdriver to drive in 16 penny nails.
Right.
It's not fit for that. So adaptability, yeah. And as Moshe said, and I quote in the book, that the ability to think in abstract terms is essentially human.
Mm-hmm.
That is our essential survival mechanism. And that also branches out, we could use the word, what comes from abstract thinking? Well, imagination is related to that, and self-awareness. And because self-awareness is different from consciousness to me, and the way Moshe explained it also, in that we have the ability to observe ourselves as we do, as we do something.
But a lot of people can't do that because that's something that we inherently know how to do as children, very small children, babies, and as we're growing up. And it's almost like that part of us gets minimized, or, that ability to adapt and that ability to really look at ourselves and be objective and observe ourselves, not only how we feel, sense, move, and think. That it's almost like we go into this complete different thinking inside the box instead of outside of it, and trying to conform to what society expects of us.
Absolutely. And that kind of deadens what comes from the inside. So anybody is capable of awareness. If you're a human being, you're capable of self-awareness. But and in terms of focus, think of any time you were the first day on a job. You are focused, and you are learning a lot faster than you're going to learn after you've been there 6 months when you settle in. But then what you're talking about is something that our culture, our tendency to live in only what our eyes can see, in only our physical environment, in only our goal-oriented mindset, only in right and wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And you talked about people beating themselves up. Yeah, that pretty much takes away our ability to access the power that we could.
Mm-hmm.
And so even when bringing that back to a practical level of running, there are a lot of things that you can actually run through. People talked about, I just run through the pain. That's the wrong way to do it. But if you're able to observe yourself and understand that you could change something and know a gentle way to do it, you actually can keep going when you have a little injury sometimes, because it will get better, not worse. It's like if I'm hitting myself with a hammer on the thumb, that really hurts. But if I stop and I start hitting the nail instead, then I get better while I'm still working.
So I think the key point there is just very small changes can make a big difference.
Yeah. And it's not all conscious control, because you can't control your movements. You can't micromanage your movements. But you could try something, and you could observe how you're doing it, and you could imagine how that would feel. Gently imagine how that would feel to just try that through your whole self, and see what happens.
Okay, so I want you to then go a little bit deeper into the imagine, because that's something that we use a lot in Feldenkrais is imagination. And then there's another term that you use that when I started my Feldenkrais training, I swore I would never say those words whole self. And it only took a few months before I was saying it and really understanding what my teachers and my trainers were saying by your whole self. So if you talk about the importance and the power of using your imagination, and then of moving with your whole self.
Okay, those two things. That's nothing to that, right?
Piece of cake.
Your imagination. So a lot of times in Feldenkrais lessons, you'll do a lot of movements on one side. You could leave it at that, and then you'll really notice the differences between one side and the other. Or you could just do the movements in your imagination on the other side, and you'll find that you have improved the other side as probably as much, maybe more than the first side that you did on the initial side anyway. And so there's a number of things involved there. One is the left side learns from the right side learns from the left side. So that's one thing. And then the other thing is, if I could ask you, you've done this many times probably, but could you turn your head just a little bit to the right and then back to center? Just a little bit. Okay. Now, could you pay attention? And I know you can do this, you've probably done it a lot, but could you just do that same movement only in your imagination? And could you notice whether the muscles in your neck are activated?
They want to activate, but then I was able to
inhibit them. You inhibited the movement, but you're still sending the same signals to the muscles. The nervous system is still operating. So it's been shown that you can improve movement if you were to exercise one hand, and then you were to spend time. Well, they usually do it with control groups, and so one group would exercise the hand, the other group would just, and there's in particular studies they do particular movements, but so you exercise the hand, the other group just imagines it, and the group that imagines that receives almost as much strengthening almost as much increase in strength as the group who just actually did the movement.
Mm-hmm.
So almost as much, usually. I know somebody who's talked about preventing atrophy in a cast just by visualizing moving those muscles. Now, actually visualizing can wear you out more than exercise. You have, it's not just, okay, I visualized it.
Yeah.
You have to actually feel what you're doing in your imagination. And then another thing is, Moshe indicated that movement is a very quick way to reach the subconscious mind. He did that because every action has an emotion behind it. And every emotion has an action behind it. Everything that we do or think is embodied. So if I think about something really hard, I would probably furrow my brow, or if I'm upset but I want to hide it, it still influences my general postural tension. Or if I'm really pleased with myself, or I'm just having a really great day, that's felt and seen in my body. And so you can't really separate the two. And I have a story in my book about Billy Mills. Do you know who Billy Mills was?
No, I don't.
1964, he was a Native American who won the gold medal in the 10,000 meters in the Olympics. And he was unknown and little thought of. And he was running against some of the best runners in the world, obviously, in the Olympics. And one of them was the current world record holder. And so he had to convince his unconscious that he could win this race in 4 years of training. And he said that every day in training, dozens of times a day, he would visualize himself winning that race. And when he got to the last 60 meters of the race, and if you ever Google this, and it's, you can find the video of this. When he got to the last 60 meters of the race, he was in third place. And 60 meters is not very far after you run 6 miles. And the world record holder was in front of him. And it's pretty rough competition. Somebody had intentionally bumped him to the outside of the track too.
Oh.
So he had to get over that. And that put him in third or fourth place with the race almost over. And at that point, he was telling himself, I've won. and he's in third place. And he took off with a sprint. He said he stayed loose. That was the secret. He took off in the sprint that if you watch it, you say, you can't do that after 6 miles. How did he do that? He just flew past the other competitors and won the race. And so we know that, what we think, it has to do with negative self-talk too, which I know that I've done a lot of. And I think that's a universal difficulty we have. But what we think is what we become. So a lot of the Feldenkrais method will have to do, he's done some beautiful lessons, understanding the whole function of the nervous system that have a lot of suggestion in them.
Okay, so I just want to clarify for the listeners that what we have been talking about is basically the scientific principle of neuroplasticity.
That's true, yeah.
And the power of being able to use your mind to be able to change pretty much anything that you do in life. When I was in physical therapy school, which that was my second career, so I graduated PT school in 96. And we were still being told in all of our neurology classes that this, nature's miracle of neuroplasticity disappears at the age of 14. Feldenkrais knew all along, that this neuroplasticity is what he was using and tapping into the power of our nervous system, our brain and our nervous system. And it's like finally now the scientific community has kind of caught up with the neuroplasticity. And that was another thing I loved so much about your subtitle, the new science of neuroplasticity?
It is relatively new. It's become a little cliche now. But say after the year 2000, it was pretty new. And I was kind of astounded. And I did PTA training, which is kind of like physical therapy training, a little bit more, cover all the same things, but more briefly. But I did that. And just like you say, back in the 90s, they were already teaching that your brain, by the time you reach 25, it's kind of a downhill slide. And what now I don't think my 70-year-old brain works like a 20-year-old brain. Not quite. But it has some advantages too. A little larger knowledge base and experience base, yeah. But so all downhill from 25. But really, I think that's a very poor understanding of the way the brain works, because what is it? It's we talk about the brain firing, and the neurons and the dendrites and the axons and all that, and all these connections are kind of electrical, chemical electrical. So that means they're doing this all the time. Even my subconscious functions are originating through all this activity in the brain. And that means every time I solve a problem, every time I talk to you, every time I do anything, there's all this activity going on. So obviously I can do it a little bit differently, and I'm changing my brain. So even in 5 minutes, you could be changing your brain. Well, you asked me about imagination, so that's the seat of creativity and powerful brain use, really. If you're going to solve any problem, you have to kind of imagine different solutions and so on. But you asked about imagination, and what was the second thing?
Your whole self.
Oh, your whole self, yeah. So that's the embodiment part, and also the new ideas about biotensegrity. So there's tensegrity structures and architecture, and then that's been applied to the human being. Moshe Feldenkrais was, one of his fundamental ideas was that we should use the skeleton for what it's made for, cancel gravity, or to hold us up easily. So if you're getting maximum use by your alignment in whatever you're doing from your skeleton, then the rest of it is as easy as it can be, standing or whatever. And so in biotensegrity, they take into account the fascia also. So the whole body is wrapped in fascia, which is this connective tissue. And so it wraps the organs, it supports them, the muscles, but then it wraps the entire self too. So that is actually part of the structure. And so that it has to be like twisting a towel. That it has to be that if you move one thing, you move everything. And if you go into the mathematics of it and build all the tensegrity models and stuff, you can really see that. And also, if you get injured and one part is not operating well, the whole structure doesn't operate well, not just that part. So Moshe said that this is something that was big. I mentioned it the other day. But in order to improve any movement, you have to change your self-image. And that was something that really struck me. I talked about being a bull in a china shop. And when I met with that second physical therapist, he was using phrases like, in the extension phase of your gait, just let it happen. And he was taking away this bull in the china shop attitude out of me. And now it has to be experimental and gentle and human. And
I like the human part, because we have a tendency to try and take that away.
Yeah. So that is a reason a lot of people get running injuries. They're not gentle and experimental and human. They're like I was, a bull in a china shop. So to really improve, you have to refine your self-image of what an extraordinary being you are.
Well, it's so amazing. When I started my training, I was 50 when I started training. And of course, I was still taking ballet classes at least 5 days a week. And it was so amazing, the change in my ballet technique and the freedom that I gained through the training to be able to dance in a way that was absolutely effortless. My extensions were higher, my flexibility, the forward bend, backward bend, everything, even my pirouettes were so much better. I was, as we say in Feldenkrais language, far more organized.
Yeah.
In my nervous system and my structure. But I mean, it was just such a difference, and it was so liberating. And of course, many of my friends saw it and it was like, wow, what are you doing differently? And it's like, well, Feldenkrais. And so I did work with a few of the other dancers, but they would always revert back to the same patterns of trying to push things and make things happen, and didn't understand why they kept getting injured.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, so here's another point. And there's a quote from Feldenkrais that I heard the other day was shared on a website, but is that athletes, dancers, and high-level movers are always on the edge of between self-correction and self-organization. Mm. So because you're doing something that demands so much, you're always on that edge of, do I push through this or do I learn to do it better? Mm-hmm. So possibly even more than the general population, because mm-hmm. you have such a high. I mean, think of running in the Olympics. I
couldn't imagine. I just couldn't imagine.
Yeah. And yet you have, can't remember the swimmer's name right now, but she was swimming at a world-class level, gaining silver medals in the Olympics in her 40s.
Wow.
Yeah. So she was swimming with swimmers half her age. Now she had gained her gold medals probably in her 20s, or when much younger. And I don't remember. I don't know why I can't think of the name right now. So
yeah,
a lot of people.
But that's just amazing, because in any kind of sport, that grueling and at that level, you're done probably by the time you're 30. And I guess, I'm not a football fan, but who is it that's, oh my gosh, Tom Brady.
Yeah.
I mean, he's what, 44?
He goes to bed at the same time every day, gets mm-hmm. 9 hours of sleep, whether he needs it or not, but he probably always needs it. Mm-hmm. He has a much more mindful, probably, attitude about his strength training. And he's quite a student mm-hmm. of the game with 20 years experience.
You said that beautifully, a student of the game. But to me, I think he's more of a student of life, and he's a student of self-awareness and being aware of his body and how to take care of it so that he can perform at this level. And, 44 really is not that great of an age, but for a professional football player, it's pretty remarkable.
Yeah, that's right. 44 is not very old for a lot of people, but yeah. for that many years of playing that particular game, which is not terribly good for your body.
Yeah, no, it's not. So the other thing I just want to get these key points going back to your book. And some of the goals that you said, or you talked about, that you do address in your book, is to look at fitness a different way.
Yes.
And if you can just explain that and just kind of touch on that a little bit. So you're redefining fitness. So it's not fitness, physical fitness per se, but it's fitness for life and life fitness. So if you could just elaborate on that a little bit, I'd love that.
Yeah. I have a whole section where I kind of indicate that it's inherent in human beings to explore. We're not happy if we don't do that. Mm-hmm. But in terms of the whole last section defines a new fitness pyramid that's not based on just meeting or beating a goal. And that it's not a new idea. It's never a new idea, but it's one that you can never talk about enough. So it's based on, instead of just, there could be a football team, for instance, that wins a championship, but next year they don't. Mm-hmm. Or then you have John Wooden, who taught character, and his teams won year after year after year. Mm. So in a rigid thinking, goal-oriented pyramid, you either make your goal or you didn't. So if you didn't, maybe you got injured, or maybe for some reason you didn't make your goal. So now you failed. And in an awareness potential, if awareness and potential are your foundation, then you enter into a learning process in which there is no such thing as failure. And you always are on an upward path. And so that's basically the distinction I was trying to make. And you can achieve a much higher potential, a much higher level of self-satisfaction, especially if you're not calling yourself a failure.
Yes.
And if you realize that there aren't any failures really, if the learning process is primary, then how can you possibly fail? You know the old Thomas Edison quote, "I haven't failed. I've just found 1,000 ways not to make a light bulb."
That's right.
And what rich learning there is in that. Now I can not only tell you why this idea doesn't work, or that this idea doesn't work, but why it doesn't work. I know exactly why it doesn't work. And that will head me in the direction of finding what does work. So yeah, it's just a different way of living that invites learning and innovation and maybe even humility. and as a coach, it would invite a better way to treat people. They've paid a lot of tribute to John Madden lately. And I didn't see the documentary, but I know that. Do you remember the incident when Darryl Stingley was injured?
I don't remember.
I think Jack Tatum hit him and he never got up and he never walked again.
Oh.
And John Madden, that was a player on the opposite team. And he went to the hospital that night.
Oh.
And did so much for the family in the years after. And no, that's the coach. And the coach of the team, who I think at the time was, I'll mention it, was Chuck Fairbanks. He got on the plane to go home and left him there in the hospital. And Madden made a call and said, "Get him off that plane and get him over here." I didn't want to say anything derogatory about Chuck Fairbanks. That wasn't the point. But there's two different styles of coaching.
Yeah.
And I love to tell the story in my book of the Fosbury flop. You remember that? Dick Fosbury in Oregon called himself the worst high jumper there was. The worst high jumper in the state of Oregon.
Okay.
But he went to the Olympics and won the gold medal.
Oh, jeez.
Because he invented a new style of doing the high jump, which is now universal. And it's even been proven mathematically and in physics to be a better way of doing the high jump. He did that. And because he just said, my body isn't doing it the other way. And he paid enough attention to that to go and win the gold medal, which he might not have done now, but he did it by paying attention, not by being the most powerful jumper in the world. So a gold medal.
Self-awareness.
Yeah, self-awareness.
It's the key to everything.
Yeah, it's the key to everything. So I'd like to say at least one more thing. That is, less really is more. The tiniest adjustment can solve your whole problem. And so I often wonder why people would want to go do a whole bunch of exercises for their knees when they might be running in a way that will damage their knee every time they do it. And it doesn't matter to me, I guess, because if you know what you're doing, you could do some good with strengthening. But if you do the strengthening just to solve your problem and you don't know what you're doing, I know you described yourself as a reforming physical therapist.
A recovering physical therapist.
Recovering, I'm sorry. Yeah.
But, I probably shouldn't even say that because honestly, I really don't think I was that into physical therapy. Yeah. Once I got into school and started working, it was like, this really isn't for me. And that's why I ended up going out and doing my own thing because I just couldn't embrace the traditional physical therapy model. It just didn't resonate with me. And then, when I found Feldenkrais, it was like, whoa, this is just amazing.
Yeah, I had some of that same conflict, but I do want to give a shout out to physical therapy and physical therapists. I've known some marvelous, marvelous physical therapists, and there is a need for it. So
there definitely is a need for them, but
it's just not what we're talking about here.
Right. This is something completely different. So now you do tell us a little bit about your practice, because you do work with clients.
Yeah, when I was working full time, I really didn't have much time for that. So I wrote my book. I'm writing a second book. And now I do have a class online. And I've been doing that weekly. That's on Fridays at 4 p.m. Pacific. And you can get to that by going to my website, which is awareathlete.com. I love to work with age groupers. I love to work with people who love to hike and run and do those things. But you don't have to be any of those things to attend the class. They're relatively inexpensive. They're not like one-on-one work. And it's a great thing. I recommend anybody to try who wants to improve their movement or have a really successful improvement with a chronic injury.
So now tell us, what is the title of your second book, or is it too soon to ask? Or what's it about?
Well, it's a book of fiction. It's about similar things. It's called Mysterious Destiny, Mission to Moros. But I don't know, I can't say exactly when it's going to be out, because I've been rewriting it for a year, and it's out with some kind of beta readers, and we'll just see how that goes. And then there's some more steps along the way. So
yeah, there always is, isn't there?
Yeah.
So is there anything else, any final pearls of wisdom or tips or anything that you would like to leave the audience?
Yeah, just a little bit of awareness. And particularly, you could say, I always say body awareness. And then I say, body awareness / self-awareness. So I get that in there. But just a little bit of awareness can make such a difference. And I just want people, I can still do the things I love, and I want other people to be able to do that too. So, it's worth checking out the Feldenkrais Method and get somebody to help you a little bit, or come to an awareness through movement class, relatively inexpensive. Check it out if you were having some of the difficulties that I've had in my life. It's just so worthwhile. So there are answers out there. I guess that's what I ended with.
Well, and I think the answers are actually within ourselves. And that's what
Very
the Feldenkrais Method does. It helps you find your own answers and your own solutions to your problems. And it's an incredibly empowering method. So, yes, thank you for that.
Yeah, that's exactly what it's about. Is you have everything you need already within you. So you just want to unlock what was already there.
You've got it within yourself, and that's just an incredible, it's very liberating, it's very empowering, and it's a wonderful way to live your life.
I agree.
Scott, thank you so much for being here.
Cheryl, thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
I really appreciate it. This has been great. And thank you for connecting with me on LinkedIn, or I can't remember how we met. I think you connected with me on LinkedIn a long time ago, and then you saw my Femininja project, and that's how you sent me a message, and the rest is history.
That's right. That's right. History that we want to continue.
Absolutely. So thanks again, Scott. And everybody, thank you so much for listening. I really appreciate it. Make sure you check out Scott's website, check out his book, The Aware Athlete, check out his classes. I mean, you might be amazed how powerful Feldenkrais really is. It can change your life forever in a good way. And remember to keep on learning. That self-awareness is an amazing tool that you can use for the rest of your life in every aspect of your life. And that is the way of the Femininja. And that's a wrap on another episode of the Femininja Project. Thank you so much for listening. And remember, be safe, be strong, and until next time, bye now.